Good morning and welcome to Market Outsiders. It's Friday, August 29th, the last day before a long holiday weekend here in the US. My name is Namaan. I'm joined by Jenny Rae as always. Jenny Rae, do you have fun plans for this weekend as we gear up for 3 days off?
Hey, Naman, in the life of consultants in peak recruiting season, I have never really thought of, for the last 15 years at least, of Labor Day as one of those holidays that I get to enjoy. My main opportunities this weekend are we're going to go to our last water park day. It closes on Monday. So Waterworks Park, the coolest place in Reading, is officially closed for the 2025 season. And we have been longtime season pass holders. I swindled my kids a couple of years ago into splitting the season passes with me half and half. So they have to earn the money outside of our family earnings from their salaries, so they had to create little businesses to do that. The season passes are $65, so it wasn't a huge lift. But anyhow, the last day of the season pass is on Monday, so that will be a big part of our weekend. We love camping and doing other things as families. We also are kind of a little contrarians where we never jump into camping in the biggest weekends. And this just always is one of those wild weekends when you're fighting people for spots and for sticks on the ground for making your campfire. So we'll do some more camping in the fall, but this weekend it will actually be fairly chill for us. What about you?
Oh, it's going to be chill for me. I think I've been on about 30 planes this month. So whether I'm working or not, it's going to feel like a break just because I'm going to be home. So I think we're going to have a lot of college football on in the background and we're just going to be chilling. That's our weekend.
Remember those days when we would roll off of the plane onto just another plane to go be somewhere else for the weekend? I kind of laughed when I read the article when I was at Bain about the guy that lived in a box truck in the Google parking lot. But I was like, honestly, he probably spends fewer nights in that box truck than he does somewhere else. And in my life, a box truck would kind of make sense because there were times when I probably spent maybe 8 to 10 nights at home in any given month. And so yeah, I laughed about it and then had this moment of realization, oh man, that could be me. That guy's a
Maybe that
genius,
guy's
right?
onto something. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I actually remember having a conversation about it that I was trying to be a little bit more bougie than a box truck. I was like, you know what I would want to do? I'd want to live in a plane. I'd want to live in a plane and then you could park it wherever you wanted to go. And it was the most is unrealistic, genius, terrible idea, right? Like a plane is not inexpensive to park in the same way that Google is. It does not have access to the same kind of amenities. It's not even like a boat where you have a club where you can take a shower. It's literally just a box on a very hot tarmac that's incredibly expensive to park. That if you want to talk about parking lots and the economics of parking lots, airplane parking lots, I'll tell you what, that's pretty good economics right
I've
there.
been recently, not because I can afford it, but I've just out of curiosity, I recently dove into the economics of owning your own plane and I learned a lot. So we might have to do an episode on that because I think just
Oh,
it almost never makes economic sense, but there's other utility you can get from it, relationships, flexibility, etc. Where I think if you have a different mindset beyond just financial ROI, it can make sense. But I was really blown away by kind of not just what the upfront capital requirements are, but what the ongoing maintenance and OpEx expenses. And yeah, maybe we should break that down one episode because I learned a lot and I thought it was really fascinating. And it's just, if you don't know someone who owns a plane, you got to go figure it out on your own.
see, this is the problem with having a podcast where we love what we do is that this week we came up with a concept idea of doing the economics of the Taylor Swift Travis Kelce wedding. I mean, that's happening. There's no question. I mean, this podcast would be phenomenal. The economics of owning a plane. Y'all need to know this. These are things that you must know. They will prepare you for case interviews for life and more. Naman, today I feel like we could go a couple of different directions. I think we should do a few of the ideas that we've had floating around, but I think we should talk about water parks since I kind of already brought it up. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Okay. My family this week got sucked into a new water park vortex, just the same way that you would get sucked into a slide on a tube. And so this is our evidence. This is the badge from the Great Wolf Lodge in Southern California. And I just, was interested already in the business, but we walked in the door, weren't there for 5 minutes. My husband leans over to me and he goes, "This place is printing money." And so I thought, okay, we might have to do an episode just a little bit about the history and the economics and the thought process of some of the ways that they're using business principles to actually both run an incredibly lean operation. I was very impressed by how little staffing they had, but it didn't feel like there was too little staffing, and also how many revenue upsell capture opportunities they took when we were there. And so, Naman, have you ever been to a Great Wolf Lodge? And what do you know about them if you haven't?
I have not been to a Great Wolf Lodge. I've heard a lot about them. And my understanding of a Great Wolf Lodge is like cruise ship on land. That's the way I think about it. So you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like it's like a hotel with a whole bunch of activities kind of all rolled up into one. And you're kind of on site the entire weekend. And like everything that you'd want to do or eat is like contained within that like footprint. Is that an accurate understanding of what Great
I think
Wolf
that's a great way to think about it. Yeah. I think part of the reson that it wasn't really on my radar is that I had to look this up. This was a trivia question that my kids were asking me on the way to Great Wolf Lodge, is when the first one was opened. And so the first Great Wolf Lodge was opened in 1997. And can you guess where in the United States, this is a U.S. brand as of right now, where in the United States that first lodge opened? I'll be massively impressed if you get this, but I still think it's worth asking.
I'm going to guess Ohio.
Okay, tell me why. Come on, you got to justify it.
So I've driven like a lot through the Midwest, and I see Great Wolf Lodges a lot, like Ohio, Indiana, like that part of the country. And it just honestly, the name, what I understand about the experience, I just feel like it's a Midwestern brand. And so that's why I'm going with Ohio. That's my final answer.
Honestly, I'm impressed. I am also impressed that you didn't try to pin it down to a city. I should have specified, because that would have been more difficult for you. It is a Midwestern brand, but it is not from Ohio. So the Wisconsin Dells
Oh, Wisconsin. Okay.
was the first place. And I just recently went to see, this is all about connecting the dots. I went to Lake Geneva for a wedding at the end of July, so about a month ago. And some of the people that were there at the wedding were from Chicago and had never been to Lake Geneva. And Lake Geneva is classy. It's beautiful. There's these beautiful mansions on this lake, and they've preserved a kind of very UK walking path mentality. So you can walk the whole lake in people's front yards, in their landscape gardens, next to their boat ramps. It's a beautiful, beautiful place. And some of our friends were like, I can't believe I've never been here. The only place I've ever visited is the Wisconsin Dells, which is also about the same distance from Chicago, but it's basically a land of water parks. And specifically, Great Wolf Lodge had this, innovation of indoor water parks because of the weather challenges in Wisconsin. So in 1997, which I graduated from high school in 1998, if you want to calculate how old I am, I basically missed like an entire, I was a generation that did not experience Great Wolf Lodge. So this was kind of my first opportunity. You probably could have gone there in like middle or high school, Naman, if your family had been so inclined. But it doesn't seem like the vibe that you guys put off for your weekend or weeks away.
No, that wasn't our vibe growing up.
Well, let me talk just a little bit about kind of, some of the viral pieces of the Great Wolf Lodge booking experience, like how our family booked our first one, and then also a little bit about what it was like when we were there. And I'll add in some pictures for later, so that we can kind of give you a little bit of a sense of it, and if you want to do some research on it. Great Wolf Lodge is a indoor water park. It is always set to 84 degrees inside the water park area. And so they run a special on 8/4 on August 4th every year for $84 rooms. And so on that special for one day, you can book a Great Wolf Lodge starting at $84. So our room was like pretty close to that. And they have, maybe 6 to 7 room types, starting with a very basic, like, 2-queen sofa bed situation. Everything is oriented for big groups and families. And then they have some that sleep like 8 or 10 people with kid cabins. So they have, a bunk room that's wolf themed. So the rooms are kind of one of the features, right? So, and that's one of the goals, is that you don't just go to a Great Wolf Lodge, but you actually stay there. And then one of the things that they've done to capture your overnight stay is that they've priced the daily rate of a Great Wolf Lodge ticket to the water park at a like $80 to $100 price point. So it doesn't make sense if you're bringing, 2 or more people not to stay over, right? So the kind of like general economics are, if you want to go to the water park, then it's cheaper to stay over and get not just 1, but 2 days for free because they let you in for both days from open to close in the water park on the days that you're staying. But it makes sense to just stay over. So why not just stay over? And that's just the secret entry point to a portal of very expensive decisions. And so, the Great Wolf Lodge moments kind of, we had a little bit of a buffer this time because when we entered the experience, we had not been there before. The next time we go, if we ever go again, it will be my children will be lobbying me to spend 3 times what I spent this time. And that's part of the genius of how Great Wolf Lodge operates. So, Naman, if it were you, what would you imagine a cruise ship on land would offer to capture more spend from its unsuspecting clients?
Well, I mean, as you were talking, I was just thinking about the business model, and I was like, okay, if I was gonna like map this out without ever being a consumer, how would I think about this? Right. And number one, I would think about, okay, like revenue from like your hotel operations. So like room occupancy. And I think one of
Mm,
the beauties of this business model is the fact that because it's indoor, like you can maximize occupancy year round. So this is a primarily fixed cost business, right? So they're focused on occupancy, they're focused on volume more than like extracting like every last bit of contribution margin they can off of your like hotel stay. Like the contribution margin comes from, I would guess, all the ancillaries. And so the way that I would think about that is um, I'm sure there's food on site that they charge you a premium for, like you're a captive audience. I'm sure that there are like premium games or experiences that aren't included in the standard pass. That could include, I don't know, maybe there's certain water slides that you only get for being like a premium member. I don't know if you get to cut the line if you pay for the premium ticket. I don't know if there's like a game area, right? Like when your kids aren't at the water park, is there like a game room or other activities? Like, I've heard other people say there's like bowling alleys like on site. So like, do you pay extra to go bowling, right? Like I would think that like food and other activities and games are really the primary levers that they pull to kind of extract extra spend per visit. And then you're probably capturing people like on the other side of the value chain too, like people who would never like come to stay, but who would pay for a day pass. And so you kind of you have your kind of your day pass people, you have your people who will come and pay for like your standard hotel room and the standard experience. Then you have families like you, it sounds like, who will come and stay. They'll pay for the hotel room and then their kids will bug them to pay for everything else too. Right. And so you're kind of capturing people up and down the value chain is the way I would think about it.
So there were a couple of things about the experience that, first of all, you nailed it. There were a few that were not a part of it that I thought were interesting, and I'll highlight those first because I think that those are things that you might expect. But from an experience perspective, I felt like this hotel was built more recently. It felt like a modern experience. And so I think that was kind of interesting. That's one of the reasons that we looked up when it was actually founded, because it didn't feel like it was founded in the 70s trying to modernize. It felt like it was founded in a modern experience. And we really did experience that when we were there. And then there were a couple of ways that, of course, like I couldn't help thinking there were like more ways to capture spend from people. And I felt like there were opportunities to do that. So the first thing that I thought was interesting is that there was no like water park specialty features. So there
Mm.
were no restrictions inside the water park, and there was no cutting a line pass. So if anybody has recently been to Disney or Six Flags or any of these other kind of theme park style operations, most of what they're doing is they're actually like getting you in the door. Well, not Disney, but a lot of the other ones are getting you in the door with like a fairly low ticket offer, and then you can spend as much or more actually on an incremental ticket to go to the front of the line, right? So at Disney, it'll be like $30 to $200 a day for their different packages for cutting the line. And these always get, like for Disney in particular, when their part release these kinds of products, they get major stock boosts, right? Because it just is dropping straight to the bottom line. It costs almost nothing to deliver these extra services because it's a fixed cost asset. It's just a way to capture more spend from willing customers. So that wasn't present at Great Wolf Lodge, which I found kind of interesting. There weren't a ton of points of friction. One of the things that I noticed is that it was actually like incredibly well operationalized. So, for example, there were mat racer slides, 4 slides, mat racers. My husband commented at one point, the line is not long at the top for the mat racers. It feels like they could do a longer line, but they didn't on purpose because it really like changed your psychology of the line. You waited for half of the time at the bottom and half of the time at the top. And overall, it was a pretty short wait, but they couldn't have run more mats through the experience, right? So having more mats simply would have added wait time and not customer satisfaction. So there were some things that were like they were timed and dialed like to the mat, right? I was very impressed by seeing how all of those pieces of the experience worked out. The food was absolutely there on site. It felt to me a little disjointed, but they didn't offer a like unlimited dining pass, which I thought was kind of interesting. In fact, if I were going to offer a pass, I probably would have offered an unlimited drink pass.
Yeah.
But you actually even had to swipe in for every soda that you got. So there was no drink pass option. So like having an unlimited drinks option, I think could have been a way, even non-alcoholic drinks, to capture more spend from people. Drinks are usually really low margin, but the food options weren't great, and they kind of incentivized you to bring your own food or order in. And I felt like they could have dialed up their game big time. They also could have pre-offered, pre-ordered, had you like been able to be like, hey, I know that I'm going to want pizza at 5 o'clock. So there were some pretty long wait times. That one of the, I felt like sub-optimized pieces of the experience. The hotel was really well run. The rooms were very large. They had no staff that were dedicated to supporting you like while you were there. They did 0 room upgrades. You got the room you booked without question. So it was like a 100%. It wasn't a like, we'll offer you an upgrade after the fact either. It was just like you book the room, you get the room. And so their booking algorithms and systems like managed people's expectations really well. And I remember hearing a talk by a Marriott executive in 2015 maybe, about how like their brand before they were bought by Marriott did 0 room upgrades. And it was part of creating customer satisfaction, but also earlier upsells. Because if you didn't think you might get an upgrade on site, you would buy the room that you actually wanted beforehand. And then the fourth piece was the gaming piece. And I felt like that was a money printer. They had an arcade just with it like tap and go credits system, not like Chuck E. Cheese where you could do time. It was just like you pay for every single dang game. They had a bowling alley, a little mini golf place. All of them required paid credits. And then finally a game that kids could play throughout the place that was like, it was like 70 or $80 to get access to this game. And you got a few of the other things thrown into per person. And so I made my kids, my kids were like, Mom, it would be such a great value. The next time we go, we should totally do this. So Market Outsiders podcast host was like, calculate for me what our night would have cost if we had paid for that. And then at the end, they, unpersuaded by logic, had just decided that they still had to have it. So I told them, great, save your money. If you ever want to go to Great Wolf Lodge again, you're going to pay for it yourself.
That sounds like a fun weekend. I don't know if you're willing to share this, but just for reference, like how much do you think the investment was like all in for that weekend experience?
Yeah. I love that. So we ended up spending. One thing that I thought was interesting is that their all of their prices on the hotel side are non-refundable, but you can spend $40 to make it a refundable rate. So they're kind of like taking one off of the model. So because of the fact that this is a wild season for us, I actually paid for that this time. And so all in with the extra people in our room that we also had to pay for, that were kind of like above the base rate. I think it was $220 for the room, the overnight, and like the access to the water park. And then I like hustled in, bags of like, we made like fruit parfaits for breakfast rather than going to the dining room. Let me think about what we did for dinner the first night. Oh, for dinner the first night, we ordered pizza from Domino's. So that was like $30, and then we had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for lunch the second day. And then I actually like ran out and grabbed takeout for the rest of the family. So it was probably like $400, I would say, all in with parking and all the expenses. So for the 2 days at the water park and the overnight stay, it was a pretty reasonable, deal. We ended up doing just one night, so it was like a weekend, but it was one overnight, and that gave us the access that we wanted. And the kids did a lot of swimming and were kind of done after that, so that was kinda perfect for us. But yeah, so it wasn't too wild of an experience, and they did not I was not their target customer, right? Like, I was not like, "This is a memory for my kid where I should spend every dollar," but I'll do that when we're camping or hiking. Like, you should see me in Yosemite. I'm like, "You want me to pay for something? I will pay for it." But when it comes to this kind of stuff, I'm like, "Look, like, there's already enough fun things on the menu. See if you can enjoy that just as it is."
Yeah, I really think that they're catering to like the staycation consumer.
Mhm.
No one's gonna fly to go to a Great Wolf Lodge, but like you might drive like 45 minutes or an hour and just kind
Yeah.
of it as a little weekend away, but not actually have to get away. So you're not paying for plane tickets, you're not paying for additional travel. Maybe that mentally frees people up to spend a little bit more on site, which I think is part of the model as well.
I think so too, and every single one of them have big parking lots or parking, areas exactly for that reason. This one was in Anaheim in Southern California, and so I could imagine somebody coming to Disney and doing this room rate and using these as, like, Disney off days or as a way to kind of, like, blow off steam as a part of the Disney experience. It's kind of like the feel of there are very limited, like, Disney-style hotels in Southern California where you have a water park or something else. I think it was a great location pick for them. They put it in the middle of like 3 strip malls. I mean, they must have like bought somebody's strip malls off of them and like torn them to the ground and built this like monolith structure. It's not anywhere like relevant to the rest of stuff, but it's on a trolley line that does go to Disney. And I felt like, hey, like that's the kind of play here. So I do think that this one could have some like Disney offshoot customers, but it felt like a pretty encapsulated experience. Like you didn't have Disney ears, you had wolf ears. And so anyhow, I'm just curious for those of you that have been to one, if you've ever stayed at a Great Wolf Lodge, what your experience was. I looked up their revenue. It seems like it's over $1 billion. So pretty impressive revenue play. They have pretty limited numbers and you'll hear them advertising on kind of kid-focused podcasts or other areas. So I think it's a business model that's worth identifying because if you're thinking about a fixed cost business, I think this business is doing a fantastic job of capturing revenue on the other side. So if you're ever thinking about building a fixed cost business, this business would be one to learn from.
Two last things I was thinking about, January. We've already kind of broken down the revenue streams of a Great Wolf Lodge. My next question was just going to be, okay, if you're doing around $1 billion in revenue per year, how many locations do you have? And I've tried to figure out the per location revenue on an annual basis, and you can start to really then split out by category, like what your drivers are of that revenue, and you can start to uncover areas for growth. So that would be like my next step in terms of future analysis. And then the last thing that I was just kind of thinking about and connecting the dots between this and what I've seen in the news is, when you look at Disney's earnings, like over the last quarter or two, one of the things that you've heard them say is that their park revenue is at record highs. And so as you were talking about Great Wolf Lodge, I was thinking about what Disney's been saying on their earnings calls. And I was like, oh, it seems like consumers are shifting their spend maybe away from products and towards services and experiences. And this was just another kind of anecdotal piece of evidence for me. Like when we look at the news, when we look at the headlines, you hear a lot about the weakening of the consumer. And I'm sure at certain income levels and certain areas of the economy, like and certain geographical areas, that's happening. But I think that this is instructive for all of us. Sometimes when you hear about weakening, you're hearing about weakening from companies and from segments of the economy that are just seeing spend move from them to somewhere else in the economy. So it's not like consumers are completely pulling back. It's just, oh, they decided this is where we'd rather spend our hard earned money. And it seems like right now, in the US at least, you're seeing kind of a record rise in parks revenue at Disney and just experiences revenue overall. And so just I was connecting your personal experience to what I'd heard Disney say, and it tracked for me, and I thought was interesting that you seem to be and your family seems to be part of that trend that is pretty widespread right now.
Well, Naman, it's not just with like kids or families or these kinds of experiences either. My brother has mentioned to me once or twice that like guys, golf weekends banned in Oregon is this kind of like one year ahead plus booked out like guy weekend mecca where people will spend a ridiculous amount of money to co-rent a house and go golf together. And it's kind of like it's a on land all-inclusive resort. And I think that you're exactly right. We don't bundle them in the US because our costs are much higher, but we do work to create these kinds of offers. And I've been thinking recently in hospitality about like, how could you run a Great Wolf Lodge without a water park? Like, right, the water park is so expensive to operate. So it is a fixed cost. You're capturing more revenue than that. But is there a way to kind of build the next generation of that using a top golf integrated experience or other kinds of experiences that are even cheaper to operate? And so I think that you might begin to see some of those kind of integrated experiences. In fact, I think that malls and mall locations are some of the core places where you're going to begin to see that kind of integrated overnight stay. And in business school, I studied different real estate classes. Hotel is often the most profitable. It's the most cyclical, but it's also the most profitable. And so, I think there's a lot of real like interesting opportunity there. But the last thing I was going to say, just in terms of connecting the dots, is like when you get to that revenue target, if they're not already, which I don't think they are, this is a prime private equity target, because basically private equity is like, look, all you need is cash. And the more Great Wolf Lodges you open, the more money you print.
It's
Right.
just capital to scale.
It's just capital. It's like just a capital flow. And so like I would imagine that if they haven't already been in talks, this would be like the kind of target. And that's exactly why I brought it up today, not just for my family's experience, but because if you're going to get, a case interview and you're thinking about this type of business, this is the kind of business that a private equity firm would ask you to analyze. Like, what is, just like what you said, Namaan, like, what is the current experiential trend? Do we expect it to continue? If we do this major capital build out, can we expect to see similar capture? What is the density of these kinds of places, that makes sense? There's only 2 in the whole state of California. So how many more could you put in a place like California if we hand you unlimited cash? Right. And then, and that's that, like, I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a restaurant owner. That was the play. It was just like, you make more money with each incremental storefront. So like, can you open 100 of them? If so, then we can sell this at a premium because we will have magnified, shared services across each one of these, and we will have juiced our revenue in a big way. So I'm excited to kind of, tie those two together, because I think with private equity, that's a key play here.
Well, Jenny Rae, thanks for bringing us this story today. I appreciated diving into Great Wolf's Lodge. I haven't thought about them in a long time. It's just the last time I drove through the Midwest, I noticed them and I was like, interesting. And so it's been a little while since I thought about them. Enjoyed this conversation. If you enjoyed it as well, please leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Help us trick the algorithm. Tell the algorithm this is valuable, that this is helpful content, so that more people can be exposed to it. We really appreciate it. We hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. We will not be live on Monday, but we will see you back here on Tuesday, September 2nd.
Thanks, everyone.